Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Monday, January 19th, 2026. And I have to say, looking at the stack of reports we have on the desk today, if you're feeling a little bit of whiplash, you are definitely not alone.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like the world woke up this morning and just decided to move in about 4 different directions at once.
That is a very diplomatic way of putting it.
You think so?
I do. It is definitely a morning where the ground is shifting. Sometimes, literally, as we'll get to in California.
Right.
And sometimes metaphorically with the geopolitical map being, redrawn in real time.
Exactly. And that is our mission here. We're not just going to read you the headlines because, you can get those anywhere.
Of course.
We're going to take this massive stack of sources. We've got articles, scientific papers, diplomatic cables, and we're going to try to connect the dots.
Find the signal in the noise.
Find the signal in the noise, because today, the scope is just enormous. We are talking about everything from these microscopic vibrations that could fundamentally change how your smartphone works.
Yeah, that story is fascinating.
All the way to a geopolitical standoff that, it sounds like it was ripped from a history book 100 years ago.
Right.
It involves the potential purchase of Greenland.
It sounds like fiction, but the implications for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, are incredibly serious.
So we're going to unpack all of that.
Yeah.
We're also going to take a ride into the eye of a Category 5 hurricane with a robot.
An uncrewed robot. Yeah.
And then we're going to zoom out, way out, and look at the ethics of actually colonizing the solar system.
It really is a day of tension. If you look for a through line here, it's all about boundaries.
Boundaries. I like that.
Yeah, you've got tectonic boundaries testing us. You have national borders being challenged by economic warfare. And then you have the boundaries of scientific ethics being pushed right into the void of space.
That is a perfect framing. So let's start with those physical boundaries right here on Earth. Specifically, let's look at what is happening beneath the ground in Northern California. We all grew up hearing about the big one, the San Andreas Fault.
It's a household name.
Right. But the data dropping today suggests we might have been looking in the wrong place, or at least looking a little too narrowly.
That's right. Scientists have identified a previously concealed seismic zone in Northern California. And to really understand why this matters, we have to look at the map. This isn't just some random crack in the bedrock. This zone is sitting right at the intersection of the San Andreas Fault and the Cascadia subduction zone.
And for the listeners who aren't amateur geologists, the Cascadia subduction zone is the really scary one, isn't it?
It is the sleeping giant of the Pacific Northwest. San Andreas gets all the Hollywood movies.
Right, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Exactly. But Cascadia is a subduction zone. That means one tectonic plate is actively sliding under another. And it extends for about 1,000 kilometers, so 600 miles? All the way from Northern California up to Vancouver Island in Canada.
That's a huge area.
It's massive. And when these zones rupture, they don't just, rattle the windows. They are capable of magnitude 9.0 megathrust earthquakes.
9.0 is, that's catastrophic. We're talking about the kind of energy release that literally reshapes coastlines.
Precisely. We're talking major tsunamis, widespread liquefaction. It's a whole different category of disaster.
So what does this new research actually show?
It shows that the interaction between the North American plate and these smaller oceanic plates, specifically the Honda Fuca plate, is much more complex, much more tangled than our previous models suggested.
And there's this hidden zone of activity right where they all meet.
Exactly. A zone we didn't know was there, or at least didn't understand.
So how did this stay hidden for so long? California has to be the most seismically monitored piece of ground on the entire planet.
Oh.
Did we just miss a big quake?
No, and that is actually the fascinating part of the science here. They found it by listening to the silence. Or, maybe more accurately, the whispers.
The whispers.
They analyzed what are called tiny earthquakes. These are swarms of tremors that are so small they're barely perceptible to humans. You wouldn't even feel them.
Okay.
But for seismologists, these microquakes, they act like a flashlight in a dark room.
So they light up the fault lines.
They illuminate the structure. By mapping exactly where these tiny pops and cracks are happening deep underground, they were able to build a 3D model of this previously hidden fault system.
Okay, so the ground is murmuring. But why does finding this specific hidden zone actually change the risk profile for, say, San Francisco or Seattle?
Because it helps us forecast the locked patches.
Locked patches.
Think of it like this. If a fault is slipping smoothly, just a little bit all the time, that's actually good. It's releasing stress continuously.
Like a pressure valve.
Exactly. But if a section of the fault is locked, it means it's stuck, it's not moving, and all that tectonic stress just builds up and builds up and builds up.
Until it snaps.
Until it snaps. And that snap is the magnitude 9.0 earthquake. This new data helps us identify those lock zones with much greater precision, especially near those major urban centers.
And we have to remember the context here, the historical context.
We absolutely do. Indigenous oral histories from the region and our own geological records both confirm that the last major rupture of the Cascadia zone was in the year 1700.
So mathematically, we're in the window.
We are in the recurrence interval, yes. On a geological timescale, 300-some years is the blink of an eye. Finding this hidden zone, it forces a complete reevaluation of infrastructure resilience.
Building codes, bridge designs, emergency plans.
All of it. It's a very stark reminder that the planet operates on a timescale that really doesn't care about our 5-year plans.
Wow. Okay, speaking of vibrations and things we can barely feel, let's pivot to a story that takes that exact concept and turns it into technology.
This is a wild one.
It comes from the University of Colorado Boulder. And I have to admit, when I first read the headline, Phonon laser, I thought it was a typo. I thought they meant photon laser.
I did too. It does sound like something from a bad, 1980s sci-fi movie. But it is a legitimate breakthrough in chip technology.
Okay, break this down for us, because usually when we talk about speed in computing, we talk about light. We talk about photons, fiber optics.
Light speed, right?
Why on earth would we want to go back to sound? I mean, isn't sound just fundamentally slow?
In the air, sure, sound crawls compared to light. We see the lightning before we hear the thunder. But at the nanoscale, inside a solid material, it is a completely different ballgame.
How so?
The problem engineers are hitting right now with our smartphones, with our computers, is something called the heat wall.
Right. Your phone gets hot when you're playing a high-end game or, I don't know, running a complex AI model.
Exactly. That heat is wasted energy, pure and simple. It comes from forcing electrons through tiny copper wires. It's just resistance. What the team at Boulder has done is figure out a way to use surface acoustic waves, or SAWs.
Surface acoustic waves.
Think of them as controlled micro-earthquakes, just like the ones we were just discussing in California, but happening on the surface of a microchip.
So they're literally vibrating the chip to move data around.
In a very, very highly controlled way, yes.
Yeah.
They engineered this composite material using silicon, lithium niobate, and indium gallium arsenide. It's a bit of a mouthful.
It is.
But what this material lets them do is pump these sound waves, these phonons, which are just quantum particles of sound up to frequencies exceeding 1 gigahertz.
Okay, that is fast. But I'm still trying to get my head around the practical application. Why do I want a sound laser in my pocket?
Efficiency. Right now, your phone has a bunch of separate components. It has one for processing data, the CPU. It has another one for sending radio signals to the cell tower, the modem.
Right, they're different chips.
They're different chips, and they have to talk to each other, which creates heat and uses power. This phonon laser allows for data processing and radio transmission to happen on a single chip. It uses the sound waves as the carrier for the information.
So it combines the brain and the mouth of the phone into one thing.
That is a great analogy, yeah. And because phonons interact with the material differently than electrons do, you don't generate nearly the same amount of waste heat.
And less heat means?
It could lead to significantly slimmer smartphones because you don't need these massive batteries or clunky heat sinks to dissipate all that energy.
And wearables too, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. It means wearables like smartwatches or AR glasses could last for days on a single charge instead of, just a few hours.
And for 5G, which is notoriously power hungry, this has to be a game changer.
It is massive for 5G infrastructure, for data centers. I mean, it represents a fundamental shift where sound becomes a central carrier of information in computing.
That's incredible.
It's a nice bit of symmetry, isn't it? We started with the Earth shaking, and now we're using that same exact physics to run our digital lives.
Okay, let's stay on that theme of nature is powerful and we are just trying to survive it. We need to talk about Hurricane Humberto.
Right.
Now, I know Humberto was back in September of 2025, but the full report on the Sea Star robot just came out, and the footage is It's just unbelievable.
This is a huge milestone for meteorology and for robotics. The company is Ocean, and they collaborated with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. And they deployed an uncrewed surface vehicle, it's essentially a drone boat, called the Sea Star, directly into the path of Hurricane Humberto.
And just to remind everyone, Humberto wasn't just any storm. It was a Category 5.
It was a monster. Peak intensity. And historically, our options for studying a storm that strong are really limited. We have to fly these big Hurricane Hunter planes over them.
Right, way above the chaos.
Or we drop sensors called dropsondes into them that last for maybe a few minutes before they're destroyed. We have never, ever had a robot successfully navigate the surface conditions of a Category 5 and just keep transmitting data.
It's like sending a remote-controlled car into a running blender. I don't see how it could possibly survive.
It's pretty much that. But the Sea Star has this brilliant design. It's wind-powered.
Wait, really?
Yeah, which is the beautiful irony of it. It used the hurricane's own destructive energy to maneuver itself.
Wow.
It gathered real-time data on wind speed and barometric pressure right at the waterline, which is the single most dangerous place to be in a hurricane.
And why is that specific data point, the data from the waterline, so important?
Because that is where the energy exchange happens. That's the engine room of the hurricane.
Okay.
That is where the warm ocean is feeding the storm, pumping it with heat and moisture. With 2025 showing a higher incidence of these really powerful Category 4 and 5 storms, largely due to rising sea temperatures, our old predictive models are starting to struggle.
They can't keep up.
They can't. We need to know exactly how much heat the ocean is transferring to the storm to accurately predict if it's going to rapidly intensify right before it hits land. That's the nightmare scenario.
And the Sea Star proves we can get that data without risking human pilots in the process.
We can get it continuously, for hours or days. It's just amazing that we are finally getting eyes inside the beast itself.
It really is. Now let's leave the atmosphere entirely. Let's go to space.
Right.
Because the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, has made a move today that makes the future feel very, very imminent.
They certainly have. The Space Launch System, the SLS rocket, has been rolled out to the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. This is for the Artemis II mission.
And seeing that massive rocket on the pad, I mean, the pictures are just awe-inspiring. It really hits you. This isn't a simulation anymore.
It's real.
But just to clarify for the listener, Artemis II is the one with people on board, but they aren't actually landing on the moon yet, correct?
That's correct. This is a crewed mission. It's the first time humans will have left low Earth orbit since the Apollo program ended back in the 1970s.
Half a century.
Yeah, it's been a while. They are going to fly to the moon, loop around it, test all the critical systems, life support, navigation, the radiation shielding on the Orion capsule, and then come home.
So it's a dress rehearsal.
It's an extremely high-stakes dress rehearsal. But a successful Artemis II paves the way for the landing in Artemis III and eventually the entire architecture for sending humans to Mars.
Right. But while we're preparing to go back, our robotic eyes are already out there seeing things that just, well, they blow the mind. The Hubble telescope, which, by the way, just refuses to quit after all these years, sent back some new images from the Cepheus region.
Stellar baby pictures.
Violent baby pictures, maybe.
That's a better description. Hubble captured a massive protostar. It's about 20 times the mass of our own sun.
Wow.
It's in the process of forming, and as it's feeding on all this surrounding dust and gas, it is blasting out a jet of hot gas that is 32 light years long.
Okay, stop. I'm trying to wrap my head around that scale. 32 light years. That is just... It's vast.
It is unfathomable. I mean, our entire solar system is just a fraction of 1 light year across. This jet stretches across a significant chunk of our local part of the galaxy.
And what does that tell us?
It shows just how violent and dynamic the process of star formation really is. You know, we look up at the night sky and it seems so calm and peaceful.
Serene.
Serene, but it's not. The universe is a chaotic, violent, and beautiful place.
And that brings us perfectly to the friction point. Because as we rush back to the moon with all these commercial partners, and as we look out at these stars, there is a whole new field of study emerging that's asking some really uncomfortable questions.
Right.
It's called astroethics.
And this is rapidly moving from, university philosophy classrooms to corporate boardrooms and government agencies. As commercial spaceflight expands, the old Wild West model isn't going to work anymore.
So what are the core debates here? Because it sounds a little bit abstract.
Oh, it gets very concrete very, very quickly. The first major pillar is something called planetary protection.
Okay.
We operate under the UN Outer Space Treaty of 1967. It's an old document, but it's what we have. And it says two things, basically. One, we cannot contaminate other worlds with Earth microbes.
Right, forward contamination.
And two, we absolutely cannot bring alien microbes back here. Back contamination.
Which makes perfect sense. We don't want to accidentally kill any potential life on Mars, and we definitely don't want an Andromeda strain space plague here.
Exactly. But in 1967, only superpowers went to space. It was just the US and the Soviets. Now, private companies are building landers and rovers.
So who polices a private company?
That's the billion-dollar question. If a company wants to drill for water ice on Mars, who ensures their drill bit is perfectly sterile? What are the consequences if they mess up?
Then you have a second debate, which is about inheritance.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who owns the moon? Who owns the asteroids? Who owns the stars? Is space just a backup drive for humanity where we can go and terraform planets to suit our needs? Or is it a pristine wilderness that has intrinsic value and should be left alone, like a national park? We don't even have a framework for that conversation yet.
And looking closer to home, right? In our own orbit, we have the debris problem.
We are surrounding our own planet with a shell of our own trash. Millions of pieces of junk, dead satellites, spent rocket stages, even like screws and paint flecks, all traveling at 17,000 miles per hour.
It's a minefield.
It is. And it raises a massive ethical question.
Yeah.
Are we just exporting our worst habits, our pollution, our tendency to consume and discard? Are we just throwing that into the cosmos before we've even truly figured out how to explore it responsibly?
And speaking of exporting our habits, it looks like we are also exporting our geopolitical conflicts directly to orbit. Roscosmos, which is the Russian space agency, has made a pretty significant announcement today regarding satellite internet.
They announced the Rassvet constellation. Rassvet means dawn in Russian. And their plan is to launch a sovereign, state-controlled satellite internet network by 2027. And they are not being subtle about why they're doing it. They cite military and strategic necessity.
So they want a Russian rival to Elon Musk's Starlink.
They want to ensure they are not dependent on Western infrastructure for communication, for surveillance, for drone control, you name it.
So we're seeing the balkanization of the internet on Earth.
Yeah.
With things like the Great Firewall of China and splinter nets.
And now that fracturing is extending into orbit, it strongly suggests that the future of space won't be one big, happy human family singing Kumbaya.
Right.
It will be competing blocks with competing interests, just like it is down here.
Which is the perfect, if somewhat depressing, transition to our main geopolitical story of the day. Because if space is being carved up, the Arctic is being carved up even faster. We have to talk about Greenland.
This is the story of the day. It's dominating every intelligence briefing, every diplomatic cable in the stack. It is a huge deal.
So let's just lay out the mechanism first, because this is unusual, to say the least.
It's unprecedented.
President Donald Trump has announced a 10% tariff on 8 specific European countries. And we are not talking about adversaries here. We're talking about our closest NATO allies.
The core of the alliance.
Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. And he says this tariff is going up to 25% by June.
And he hasn't been shy at all about the reason. This isn't about protecting American car manufacturers or the steel industry. The administration has explicitly stated that these tariffs are a tool of pressure.
To what end?
To force the complete and total purchase of Greenland from Denmark.
Okay, let's just step back and process that.
Yeah.
Why Greenland? I mean, yes, it's strategically located. We all get that. But is it worth blowing up the entire North Atlantic alliance over?
Well, from their perspective, it's not just about the land anymore. It is about what is under the land.
Resources.
The resources. As the ice melts, and this links right back to our climate discussion and the hurricanes, it is revealing massive, massive deposits of critical minerals.
Like what?
Rare earth elements. Neodymium, terbium, dysprosium, these are the building blocks of the entire 21st century economy. They are in the Phonon lasers we talked about earlier. They are in electric vehicle batteries. They're in the advanced guidance systems for missiles and fighter jets.
So it's a resource race, pure and simple.
It is a resource race, and it's a security play. The president is citing the need to counter Russian and Chinese influence in the Arctic, which is growing.
Right.
If the U.S. owns Greenland, it effectively controls what military strategists call the GIUK gap, the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap.
That's the gateway from the Atlantic into the Arctic Ocean.
It's the gate. It bottles up the entire Russian northern fleet in their ports around Murmansk. It is a massive strategic prize.
But the method, I mean, using tariffs on your own military allies to force a land sale, How is Europe even reacting to this?
Poorly is a massive understatement. The reaction has been one of shock and fury. French President Emmanuel Macron called it intimidation and unacceptable.
I can imagine.
The UK's Labour leader, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, called it completely wrong and a betrayal of the alliance's principles.
And what about the EU as a bloc?
The European Union ambassadors are holding emergency meetings as we speak. They're openly threatening to halt major transatlantic trade deals. There is widespread talk of a downward spiral in relations from which we might not recover.
In one of our notes, an analyst actually called this the nail in NATO's coffin.
It's a heavy phrase.
That is a very heavy phrase.
But think about what it means. Article 5 of the NATO treaty is about collective defense. An attack on one is an attack on all.
Right.
But if the leading member of the alliance, the United States, is actively using economic warfare against the other members to acquire their sovereign territory, what does the alliance even mean anymore?
It undermines the whole thing.
It pits economic leverage directly against the principle of national sovereignty. It's a profound challenge to the post-World War II order.
And what about the people who actually live in Greenland? I mean, they're not just an afterthought here.
Not at all. There are widespread protests in the capital, Nuuk, and also in Copenhagen, in Denmark. The slogan is simple and direct: not for sale.
As you'd expect.
They are citing their 2008 vote for greater autonomy from Denmark. They're arguing quite forcefully that you cannot just trade a territory and a people in the year 2026 like it's some colonial land swap from the 1800s.
It really does feel like the fundamental rules of the international order are being rewritten in real time.
Or torn up.
Or torn up. And that theme continues if we look at the Middle East. There's a new U.S. initiative regarding Gaza that is raising a lot of eyebrows.
The White House has announced the formation of a board of peace for Gaza governance. And if you look at the names on this board, it's an eclectic group.
It sounds less like a diplomatic corps and more like a corporate board of directors.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's chaired by Donald Trump himself. It includes Sir Tony Blair, the former UK Prime Minister.
Okay.
You also have Senator Marco Rubio, and Jared Kushner is on there as well.
It feels like the privatization of diplomacy.
Yeah.
But there appears to be a snag in the plan already.
A significant one, yes. The board also includes Turkey's Foreign Minister, Hakan Fidan, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has immediately and publicly objected to his inclusion.
Aye.
Israel generally opposes Turkey having such a direct hand in Palestinian governance, especially given the very high tensions between the two governments lately.
So the stated goal here is to create a transitional technocratic administration. The idea is basically to run Gaza like a distressed asset that needs a turnaround project.
That's the theory. But critics are already calling it a Trump United Nations. They argue it's an attempt to completely circumvent established protocols and the actual UN itself.
It's trying to solve a deeply historical, political, and religious conflict with a boardroom approach.
And we'll have to see how that works.
Meanwhile, just next door in Iran, the situation seems to be shifting from any sort of diplomatic maneuvering to internal collapse.
It is getting very dark in Iran. We are seeing reports of a massive, brutal crackdown on protests. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has actually admitted publicly that thousands have been killed in the recent unrest.
But he's not taking responsibility.
Of course not. He is blaming it all on U.S.-backed seditionists for causing the unrest in the first place.
And the digital aspect of this is terrifying. We talked about the balkanization of the internet in space earlier.
Iran is currently in a nationwide internet blackout that's lasted more than 10 days now. But activists on the ground are warning this might not be a temporary measure.
What are they afraid of?
They fear permanent digital isolation. The regime is trying to transition the entire country to a closed, state-controlled internet, a national network that is physically cut off from the World Wide Web.
Total information control. A digital prison.
That's the goal. And President Trump's response to this has been incredibly blunt.
What did he say?
He told Politico in an interview that it is time for new leadership in Iran and explicitly called for Khamenei to go. That is explicit regime change rhetoric. It removes any and all ambiguity about where the U.S. stands.
And just briefly, looking at the rest of the map in that region, in Syria and Iraq, it feels like the pieces are all moving there too.
They are. In Syria, government troops, Assad's troops, are advancing on Kurdish-held towns. These areas are controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF.
Our former allies in the fight against ISIS.
Exactly. The Kurds are calling this a betrayal that completely shatters previous peace accords. And in Iraq, the U.S. has officially completed its withdrawal from the major Ain al-Assad airbase.
So the Iraq Ministry of Defense is now in full control there.
That's right. So you're seeing a U.S. pullback in some areas and a much more aggressive push forward in others.
Let's bring it to our hemisphere, the Americas. Venezuela is chaotic, might be too soft a word for it.
It is a textbook example of 21st century hybrid warfare. You have kinetic action. We have reports of U.S. airstrikes targeting President Nicolas Maduro, who we should remember is indicted by the U.S. for drug trafficking.
Right. But then there's this weirder element, the cyber warfare.
Yeah. The reports mentioned cyber kidnappings.
What does that even mean in a geopolitical context? I've never heard that term.
In this context, it seems to imply holding critical digital infrastructure hostage or manipulating data so severely that it paralyzes the state. It creates this fog of war where you don't know if your power grid is down because of incompetence or because a foreign actor just flipped a switch.
And how is this playing out politically?
Well, the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, just met with White House officials. To her supporters, she's seeking support for liberation. To the Maduro regime, this is vassalage, proof that she's a puppet.
And what's happening on the ground?
Massive protests in the streets of Caracas, demanding Maduro's removal and freedom. It's an incredibly volatile situation.
And moving north, we have significant tension right here in the U.S. Minneapolis is becoming a major flashpoint for the debate on federal versus state power.
This is a genuine constitutional stress test. You have a standoff over immigration enforcement. A federal judge has restricted ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, from using certain crowd control tactics like tear gas during protests.
And these protests started for a specific reason.
They erupted after an ICE detainee allegedly choked to death while in custody, and now the Department of Homeland Security is trying to deport the witnesses to that event.
And the escalation has been rapid.
Very. The Pentagon has confirmed that 1,500 soldiers are on standby for potential deployment to Minneapolis.
Wow.
And at the same time, the Department of Justice is launching an investigation into Minnesota state and city officials, including Governor Walz and Mayor Frey, for obstruction of federal enforcement.
So you have the federal government investigating local elected officials for trying to regulate how federal agents operate within their own cities.
It's a direct constitutional clash. It asks the fundamental question. When federal law enforcement enters a city, whose laws and whose rules of engagement apply? It's a huge, huge question.
Okay, let's try to shift gears to business and economics. Because while the geopolitical world seems to be fracturing, the world of trade is, well, in some places, it's merging.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? While the U.S. is busy raising tariff walls against its allies,
right,
the European Union and Mercosur have finally, after 25 years, signed a massive free trade agreement.
And just to remind everyone, Mercosur is the big South American trade bloc, so Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay.
Correct. This deal has been in the works for a quarter of a century. It's been on and off the table so many times, but it's done now.
What does it do?
It eliminates about 90% of tariffs on goods traded between the two blocs. It creates a massive integrated market of over 780 million people.
But I imagine not everyone is popping champagne over this.
Definitely not. The U.S. government is vocally opposed because they fear being locked out of key South American markets, particularly for agricultural goods.
And there's opposition within Europe, too.
Oh, yeah. France, in particular, is very nervous about the agricultural side of this. Their farmers are worried about cheap South American beef and ethanol flooding the European market and undercutting them. But it shows that while one part of the world turns inward, another is still trying to integrate.
Speaking of money and legal battles, the corporate world seems to be just as litigious as the political one these days.
It seems to be the default way of settling disputes now.
Elon Musk is back in court.
He is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for a staggering $134 billion.
Ian with a B.
With a B. He is alleging they failed to uphold their founding obligations to humanity and made deliberately outlandish claims about their AI technology.
And on the other side of the aisle, President Trump is announcing a lawsuit against the bank J.P. Morgan for debanking him and his businesses.
It really does seem like the courtroom is the new primary battlefield for everything from tech to politics to finance.
So let's look at the market signals briefly. We have a note here that Vistra stock is surging. And this connects right back to one of our very first stories today. Why Vistra?
2 letters. AI.
Artificial intelligence.
We talked about those Phonon lasers and the next generation of computer chips. All of that artificial intelligence requires massive, massive amounts of computational power, which in turn requires massive amounts of electricity.
And Vistra is an energy company.
Vistra is a major power generator. Investors are betting that as AI continues to grow exponentially, the demand for reliable baseload power is going to absolutely skyrocket.
But that energy demand has a dark flip side.
It does. Look at the reports coming out of West Texas and the Permian Basin. The cleanup of extensive groundwater pollution in Midland from oil and gas operations is dragging on and on.
And what's the fear there?
The fear is that the combination of pollution and overuse of the aquifers will lead to critical water shortages by 2050. So we're extracting energy to power the future.
But we're potentially draining the resources needed to sustain life in those same regions.
It's a classic resource paradox.
Which transitions us perfectly to our health and science section. Because sometimes what we call progress has a very complicated ethical footprint.
Yes, and this first story is a tough one. Take the new vaccine study being conducted in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa.
Okay.
It is backed by RFK Jr. and has about $1.6 million in funding. It's looking at the long-term effects of the hepatitis B vaccine in infants. But it is proceeding despite a severe ethical backlash from the global health community.
And critics are comparing it to Tuskegee,
which is about as heavy and serious a comparison as you can make in medical ethics.
So what's the core concern?
It's all about informed consent, and whether we are experimenting on vulnerable populations in the developing world in ways that we would never, ever allow in the US or in Europe, it's a very serious charge.
On the brighter side of that field, AI is doing some absolutely incredible work in cancer research.
It really is. A new AI model has just finished mapping cancer survival rates across 185 countries, and the number one finding is stark and simple.
What is it?
Universal health coverage is a key driver of survival. It turns out the best drug against cancer isn't just a chemical compound, it's a system that allows people to access care early and affordably.
The system is the cure.
In many ways, yes. The technology is amazing, but it's useless if people can't get to it.
Now here's a stat from the stack that hit me personally this morning. A 47-year study out of Sweden says that physical fitness and strength start declining noticeably at age 35.
I think I felt my knees creak when I read that this morning. It's brutal.
That's a little too real.
But it makes sense scientifically. It confirms that you can kind of coast on youth in your 20s, but once you hit that mid-30s mark, if you aren't actively working to maintain muscle mass and cardio, the slide begins.
Well, consider that my motivation to actually go to the gym later today.
Or at least, take the stairs instead of the elevator.
Baby steps. Also in biology, there's a fascinating study on primates and same-sex behavior.
This is really interesting because it challenges the traditional, very narrow view that animal sexuality is solely about procreation.
The reproductive imperative.
Exactly. This study suggests there is a clear evolutionary upside to same-sex behavior in many primate species. It helps build social bonds, it reduces conflict within the group, and it creates stronger overall group cohesion.
So it's about community.
It turns out survival isn't just about fighting and reproducing, it's also about getting along.
And finally in science, a little bit of mystery and hope. A trail camera in a remote area captured an image of a creature that hasn't been seen alive in over a century.
The source article is a little bit coy on naming the specific species. They're waiting for full confirmation, but the excitement in the zoological community is just palpable.
That's amazing.
It's a really nice reminder that even with satellites and AI mapping every single inch of the globe, nature still has a few secrets left up her sleeve.
I love that. Okay, let's do a quick run through sports and culture before we wrap this all up.
Let's do it. In soccer, the AFCON 2025 tournament, that's the Africa Cup of Nations, saw Nigeria take third place, beating Egypt on penalties in a dramatic match.
But there's a controversy.
Of course there is. Senegal has filed a formal complaint over a refereeing decision in their semifinal, so the drama isn't quite over yet.
And in tennis.
A massive upset at the Australian Open. A British qualifier, a young player named Arthur Ferry, beat the 20th seed in straight sets. It's always great to see an underdog make a run.
Always. At the box office, it looks like the big blue aliens are still winning.
They are. Avatar. Fire and Ash is still topping the charts, beating out the new release 28 years later.
And the European Film Awards are kicking off in Berlin, celebrating what's been a really strong year for international cinema.
A lot of great films to see.
So let's bring this all back together. We have covered a lot of ground today.
But an understatement.
We started with phonon lasers and ended with African soccer. But when you look at this entire stack, what is the through line for you? What connects all of this?
For me, it is the undeniable interconnectedness of all these systems. We started with a story about a phonon laser.
Right.
That new technology requires rare earth minerals. Where are the biggest untapped deposits of those minerals? They're buried under the melting ice in Greenland.
And why is the U.S. risking a major trade war with all of its European allies?
To secure those minerals in Greenland.
And why is Vistra stock up so much today? Because the AI that runs on those very chips needs a staggering amount of electricity.
Exactly. And that same AI technology is then being used to map cancer survival rates globally, which tells us we need better healthcare systems. It's all one massive breathing ecosystem. You cannot pull on one thread like a tariff on Denmark without vibrating the entire web.
And I keep coming back to that theme you mentioned at the top, preparation. We're preparing for moon landings with Artemis. We're preparing for earthquakes in California with this new seismic data. And we are preparing, or, well, perhaps failing to prepare, for the political fallout of these new kinds of borders being drawn.
We are trying to anticipate the future while struggling, and often failing, to manage the friction of the present.
So here's a thought to leave you with today. We have the United States tariffing its closest military allies over a piece of territory. We have private companies racing to colonize space and having serious debates about who owns the moon.
It raises a really provocative question, doesn't it? Are we entering an era where the very definition of sovereignty means something entirely different than it did in the 20th century?
That's the question. Who owns the ground beneath the melting ice? And who owns the silence between the stars?
I think that is the question of our century.
Something to chew on. Thank you for listening. Stay curious and keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.